Good morning. I'll do it again like you're in church. Good morning. How are you all? Welcome to the National Housing Conference's Solutions for Housing Communications 2019 and the release of the expanded Paycheck to Paycheck database. We'll get to that in just a moment, but first I would like to introduce the lead sponsor of today's event, Bank of America, represented by Angie Garcia-Lathrop, who, in addition to serving as Bank of America's community engagement executive, is also an officer on NHC's Board of Governors and chair of our Finance Committee and treasurer. Angie oversees the bank's strategic alliances with community organizations across the nation, including neighborhood preservation efforts targeted to help families, seniors, and veterans. And she also has been a really important partner and member of our board and incredibly committed to the National Housing Conference and all the things that we've been working on and are passionate about. So without further ado, please welcome our host, Angie Garcia-Lathrop.
Nice introduction, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to do the really important work this morning. I'm here to welcome you to Washington, D.C., for those of you who have traveled here, and also welcome you to the National Press Club. It's great to be here on behalf of Bank of America. We're a proud and longtime partner of the National Housing Conference because of our commitment to serve communities and bring affordable housing, either through homeownership and access to mortgage credit or through the development and underwriting of wonderful multifamily properties out in the markets that we're in. I see many of you in the audience that I've worked with for many years now in the field of housing. We all call ourselves housers. It's where I started many years ago on Capitol Hill. I'm proud to be a part of your community, and I know Bank of America is as well. In fact, about 2 weeks ago now, Bank of America launched its $5 billion commitment over 5 years to expanding homeownership access in the U.S. And we look forward to working with many of you in the audience to bring that capability and credit to communities and ultimately to our customers. As I said, we're happy to be here, a longtime sponsor of NHC. So pleased to be a partner of David's and see your work flourish, David, as the new CEO of NHC. So on behalf of Bank of America, enjoy the rest of today. Look forward to seeing you as the day evolves.
So before we get into Paycheck to Paycheck, I wanted to just recognize a couple of people. First of all, Connie Wright from Wells Fargo, who's here. Connie is Wells Fargo, along with Fannie Mae, were generous supporters of the Paycheck to Paycheck expansion. You always say, well, we couldn't have done it without you, but we literally couldn't have done it without you, so thank you. And also some of our communications brain trust at NHC, which has been so helpful to us and our success. Ali Solis, who's here, who is the chair of our communications committee. Is Janice here as well? Janice Smith? All right. And David Jeffers, who is the elder statesman of our board. Yes, get your cane. And also has the distinction of literally my first day involved in housing, being a mentor to me and helping me back in the early 90s when some of you were watching Teletubbies. The housing affordability was a major issue for nearly every income bracket during 2018. And it is likely to be a growing problem for years to come. A supply-driven affordable housing crisis ultimately can only be addressed by more housing supply. And that is affordable to more people, which it is not today. And the 2018 edition of Paycheck to Paycheck focuses on the affordability challenges that workers face in 5 job categories in the construction industry: carpenters, electricians, HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, maintenance staff, and plumbers. And we actually look at dozens of different job categories, but in particular, we wanted to focus on the people who actually are building the houses, and can the people who build our homes afford to live in them. These jobs are critical to increasing the supply of affordable housing, and they also are an important part of any healthy local economy. Many of these jobs represent the center of the modern middle class. Others are essential entry points where workers can convert skills into increasingly higher paying opportunities. Each of these 5 occupations requires a high school diploma and training in a technical or vocational program for entry-level jobs. Jobs that offer a salary high enough to afford housing costs without a 4-year college degree are increasingly rare. And yet, 4 out of 5 workers are only able to afford a median-priced home with a 10% down payment in half of the markets in which they work. For maintenance workers, it's less than half of the markets. Carpenters and mechanics can't afford to own a home in San Antonio. These jobs offer comfortable salary without requiring a 4-year college degree, and the job market for these workers is highly competitive, with salaries being at an all-time high. Furthermore, most construction workers are also free from student loan debt, which should be a significant advantage, but in many areas it's not. For rentals, the statistics are better, but they fall off quickly when a worker is supporting a family and needs a 3-bedroom apartment. 4 of the 5 occupations cannot afford to rent a 3-bedroom apartment in 1/3 of the markets where they work, while maintenance workers are able to afford the rental of a 3-bedroom home in only 20% of the 256 Paycheck to Paycheck metropolitan statistical areas. So this year's expanded edition of Paycheck to Paycheck includes previous year's data on 1- and 2-bedroom rents and median price for sale homes with a 10% down payment assumption, as well as new data on 3-bedroom rentals and median price sales for homes with a 3% down payment assumption. This expansion was made possible by a generous grant from Fannie Mae and Wells Fargo. So let's take a look at the NHC's Paycheck to Paycheck database, which is now available on our website, which is nhc.org. So if we go to the first slide. Am I supposed to click this? Okay. This is what we have here is, I'll just stand back here. What we have here is when you log on to the Paycheck to Paycheck database, this is what you're going to see. And there's a drop-down list of metropolitan areas and occupations. And so if you want to look at a metropolitan area, say you want to look at Denver, you can check out Denver, and then it will list all the possible occupations, and you can check those boxes. You can see here we have just a small part of the list of occupations. Over here you can see we've picked a job description, and you can check a specific area. And so nationally, we'll take a look at some of these, and you can see here that we look at our annual income for a 10% down payment is needed nationally is $73,660. If you're putting down 3%, you actually need a $77,877 down payment. That's because while you're making a smaller down payment, you're going to have a larger monthly payment. And you can see here that that income in across the country is insufficient to the income of the various trades that we've picked are insufficient to afford those down payments. For a carpenter, for an electrician, for a plumber, we've shown those here. We've also added a nurse in the middle and a public school teacher. And you can see here in the national rental market, it's much better if you're renting a one-bedroom apartment. But it gets much tighter if you're renting a two-bedroom or three-bedroom apartment. And if you have a family, then it's a completely different scenario. And a one-bedroom apartment is not sufficient. This is what it looks like in Washington, D.C. This is the Washington, D.C. MSA. And in order to afford a median-level home in this community, you have to actually earn well over $100,000 a year. And none of these jobs earn enough to actually buy a home in any scenario in the District of Columbia. Here you can see the rental scenario. And you can just afford to rent a one-bedroom apartment, but you're completely out of the money if you have to rent a two-bedroom or a three-bedroom apartment. So Washington, D.C. is considered one of the higher cost markets in the country. It's not the highest. But if we look at Baltimore, you can see the numbers still are challenging. And for buying a home in Baltimore at the median price of the Baltimore MSA, you're still unable to afford a home in Baltimore in any one of these occupations. If you're renting in Baltimore, again, you can afford a one-bedroom in most cases. A two-bedroom is more difficult, but not impossible. And a three-bedroom is out of the money. So let's look at the rest of the country. Denver, Colorado, not a city that we normally associate with high-cost markets like Los Angeles and New York and California. And you can see here, when it comes to buying a home, it's twice as much as most people in middle-class jobs can afford. Here you can see in the market, most three-bedroom rentals are out of touch for most working-class families. And two bedrooms are a stretch. Only one bedrooms are really likely. This is an example of Los Angeles. This shows how bad the situation is in the extreme. We often hear about this. A note about this chart, it's actually compressed by half. If we actually made it like the other charts, the bars for the cost of being able to afford a home in Los Angeles as MSA would be literally off of the chart altogether. In the rental market, you can see one-bedrooms are possible, but for most of the rest of the property, they're out of reach. So let's look at a market, again, that we really don't think of as a problem market, but it's very instructive. In Nashville, none of these occupations can afford to buy a home. And in the rental market, you can see that they all have to stretch, except for the electricians, for a three-bedroom apartment. So here's Minneapolis. This is another example. Minneapolis, again, increasingly unaffordable. So what does that mean for us as a country, and what does it mean in terms of the housing markets? Well, what's happened is that we're simply not building enough housing that's affordable. And when we say affordable housing, it's not code for low-income housing. In the low-income and extremely low-income space, we're short about 7 million units of housing. But for everybody else up the income scale, we all know people who are either living with their parents or living with roommates or can't afford to buy a home. And it's a real problem. We have to build a lot more affordable housing that's affordable to all Americans. And that is the nature of the housing crisis that we're experiencing here. There are a variety of policy changes that are necessary to address this, but we also have to look at how at the regulatory costs. We have to look at how subsidies are used and made available, and whether or not people can actually get housing vouchers accepted. We have to look at the fact that when we look at the millennial generation, it used to be said that, well, millennials aren't interested in buying, they all want to rent. But recent polling data shows that's not the case anymore. As millennials have gotten older, they've are starting to form families and are looking for home ownership, for instance, and they can't afford it. We have the best job market for millennials in this country since the Korean War, when 10% of that age bracket was actually in Korea. And yet, 1 in 6 millennials live at home with their parents. That's a big problem. And it's a problem for our economy and for our country. So there's a lot of work to do here. I do want to just note that one of our members, the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, has a 2019 Advocates Guide, which they make available to their members and sell to the public. There's a couple of samples outside, and there are some cards that you can order them. It's a great list of all the various housing programs. It explains them in detail and then has talking points and support for these programs. But we really have to take a holistic look, which is the reason why the National Housing Conference is committed to working with all of our members this year on writing a National Housing Act. We haven't had a true National Housing Act in the United States since 1949. We had a series of housing bills in 1968. NHC has been involved in writing all of those pieces of legislation in addition to the 37 Act, but we're working on a 30 to 80-year-old housing architecture that we have got to modernize. And so it's critical that we work with all of you on how to do that, and our slogan is HR1 by 2021, and we want to make sure that we're able to put together a comprehensive plan to solve this problem over the next 10 years. So with that, thank you all for being here. We do have some time for some questions, and then we're going to launch into our program. Are there any questions? Did I say everything? Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here. And Antoinette, what's next? Okay, so we're going to take a break now, and we're going to move to the breakout sessions. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you throughout the day.